Right, the Al Jazeera documentary that tells the story of how gold is being smuggled out of Zimbabwe continues to raise sharp debate. While the Zimbabwean president is still mum about this issue, the human rights activists have raised concerns. Many believe this plundering of African resources deprived Africa the much-needed resources to address the levels of poverty on the continent. Let's talk more on this. We're now joined by former Zimbabwe Hospital Doctors Association President, Dr. Peter Magombeyi. A very welcome to you, Doctor, and thanks so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thank you, Flo, for having me, and thank you, our viewers.
Now, watching this documentary, did it, confirm the views that you already held regarding what exactly is going on in Zimbabwe?
That's correct. We have been always of the thought that our resources are channeled to a different channel which doesn't benefit the public, but only the elite minority. Now that the documentary is there, it has just confirmed what we already know.
Mm-hmm. You know, you've been quite vocal about the challenges within the health sector of the country. And one would want to see that link between what is going on with regards to the gold, the extraction of those resources in Zimbabwe, and the failing infrastructure of hospitals in Zimbabwe. You've been able to link those two. Talk to us about that.
Oh, thank you very much. The situation in our hospital is very sad.
Yeah.
We don't have a healthcare system to talk about anyway. The system has long collapsed. If I talk of the biggest central hospital, we only have one maternity theatre. If you go to Mpilo Central Hospital in the second capital city, they don't have a dialysis machine. So in the United Bulawayo Hospital, they actually have to refer patients to other hospitals for dialysis, and patients, they have to wait for weeks for them to have dialysis done, and some of them, they die in the waiting process. And we happen to have a very sad situation that if, for example, if a pregnant woman is going for cesarean section, she has to buy all the sundries for herself, including anesthetic drugs, isoflurane and bupivacaine. I'll explain this. These anesthetic drugs, these are very dangerous drugs that are supposed to be handled by only qualified medical personnel, right, not by people in the streets. But we've come to a point where a pregnant woman has to go and buy from the streets and put in a handbag in preparation for a cesarean section. It's totally unacceptable.
Yeah. What does the government of Zimbabwe have to say about all of this? I mean, I would imagine there's, a Department of Health or, something similar in Zimbabwe. I mean, you paint a picture of something that's really quite unacceptable. I mean, in one hospital, you're saying one maternity ward that's to service so many people. When they are engaged, I mean, what do they say? It's interesting, though, when we're talking about this particular documentary that, the president of Zimbabwe has apparently, stayed mum on all that's been revealed. So that's probably also an indication of how his cabinet members would also be reacting to what's going on the ground. But let's talk about that then. I mean, anything that they have to say about, this healthcare system that you speak of?
Unfortunately, those in power, they haven't been sincere in addressing the issues of healthcare workers. They've always negotiated in bad faith. To an extent that those in power, I can say the oppressors, they've come up with legislation that is not in keeping with modern day, all this to suppress the concerns of the healthcare workers,
right, so
that they can't, regroup or go for industrial action or collectively table their labor disputes. But here's the sad situation. Healthcare workers will move out of the country. They will go for greener pastures where professionals are treated with dignity and fairness. And that's exactly what has happened. There's been a serious exodus of healthcare workers to developed nations, the UK, the United States, Canada, South Africa, etc., etc. So Zimbabwe is losing the brains and the resources. It's not good for the country. It's not good for Zimbabwe, you know. And now the unfortunate part is South Africa has come to a point where it's carrying our burdens as a nation for a very long time, and it's very sad.
So you do make the link to the fact that there has been a lot of Zimbabweans coming to the country due to
that's
the
correct.
state
That's correct. And
Yeah.
and I've seen the situation in South African hospitals, and at this point in time, I would love to thank South Africa for being kind to us as Zimbabweans. South Africa has carried our problems for a very long time. South Africa has shown us unconditional love, and it's very embarrassing now. You know, we get to see Zimbabweans failing to get treatment because they are undocumented. But then you then ask yourself, we have a functional country. You know, what Zimbabweans are asking for is a functional healthcare delivery service system that benefits all Zimbabweans, not the elite minority.
Yeah.
But the situation is very sad. But in that regard, I would love to applaud South Africa for carrying our problems. You have been with us.
But Doctor, you know, we're talking about a healthcare system that is on the brink of collapse, or even in collapse.
Has already collapsed.
It has already collapsed. In your view, how can these economic challenges of Zimbabwe be addressed if those that are especially impacting the healthcare system, if we're saying that, you know, government simply isn't necessarily worried or interested in dealing with the issue?
The unfortunate part is there's the political will. You know, those in power, they're not ready to fix our problems. There's been what I can say, misplacement of priorities. You know, the resources are there, but there's the political will to change our situation, which is very sad.
Yeah, I mean, next year Zimbabweans will be going to the polls. Oh no, it's this year, in fact, that Zimbabweans are expected to vote. I mean, obviously, during the time that, you know, every time that we hear that Zimbabweans are to vote, we start to hear about political fights, we hear about killings and so forth. What do you expect? I mean, you know, when the late President Mugabe was unseated, people thought that there would be changes in Zimbabwe, but it seems that hasn't, in fact, it hasn't happened. So are there any great expectations, you know, once Zimbabweans go to the polls this year, of anything that could actually change? Because it does seem as though, you know, politicians are also themselves linked to some of what's going on.
It's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that when President Robert Mugabe was unseated, we actually thought that things were going to change for the better for Zimbabwe, for the common Zimbabwean. But unfortunately, now we are here. Some of us are now here in exile in South Africa. We are still speaking in circles, you know. The very same issues which were raised by those who were there during Mugabe's era, those are the very same situations that we are raising now.
Yeah.
And we've been victimized for saying genuine things. We are not just pulling this from the blue. We are saying things which are on the ground. We've seen that the healthcare system has collapsed. We've said it, but we've been victimized. We've been called names, puppets, traitors, unpatriotic. But then you start asking yourself, when you watch this documentary, that tons and tons of gold are being looted for personal gains. You then ask yourself, is this patriotism? Is this what we should call patriotism when funds and resources which are meant for the public are being looted for personal gains?
Yeah.
Certainly not.
All right. We appreciate your time. I wish we had more time to chat on this. Thanks very much for giving us your input. That's former Zimbabwe Hospital Doctors Association President Dr. Peter Magombeyi speaking to us on the back of that Al Jazeera documentary that talks about gold being smuggled out of Zimbabwe, which is continuing to raise sharp debate, as it has obviously impacted many sectors in many industries in Zimbabwe.